welcoming Urs again in another space of the Habitat Center. And on behalf of Nazar and the Habitat Center, I have to yet again thank Chandrika Grover and Pro Helvetia for getting Urs here. I'm also delighted that Avik Sen is here, one of the most sensitive and insightful writers on photography. I think most of you must have been here for the keynote address, which was given by Urs in the amphitheater last evening. And in the slightly muggy but rainy yet beautiful environment of the amphitheater, we heard lots of ideas and debates centering around photography, which Urs ended, which I thought was the nicest way, by in fact giving a message to all the young photographers to just think differently, look differently, and represent differently. So this session really basically is a follow-up to what he said yesterday, for all those who want to ask him questions and couldn't ask questions yesterday. And Avik is here to kind of field the questions well and carry on the debate in a
and to make sure that the questions are really questions. And not just a long sentence with a question mark at the end. So
well, I leave that to the two of you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
I just thought it would be good to kick off a conversation with Urs while you get things sorted in your head as to what you want to ask him. Or, I mean, you don't really have to ask a question, I mean, but just do try to keep it short and precise so that we can make this conversation more inclusive. And so in about 15 minutes, we will open our conversation to the audience, and then it can go back and forth. I just thought, Urs, to take you back to the way you finished your keynote lecture yesterday. And you talked very interestingly about subjectivity and introspection, that in this age of the proliferation of the digital image and the photographic image, what can animate or reanimate photography is, in a way, the human mind. And I was trying to think about how that would have an impact, or how one could, from the point of view of a photographic education, include that kind of an approach to teaching photography to young people, for instance. How do you teach subjectivity? How do you teach introspection?
I might have a problem to answer that question because I restarted teaching 3-4 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually teaching photography before I started the museum, which is more than 22 years ago.
Mm.
And now, after having finished the museum, I will restart teaching at the art school in Zurich.
Mm-hmm.
So I will actually be confronted with that question myself.
And what will you do?
How can you teach it? Before maybe we start to talk about how we can teach it, I'd like to answer in that field and say how needed this is. At one point yesterday I said, maybe we don't need any new images anymore. There are billions, not millions, billions of photographs around. So why making a new image? Why not just using those images? Why not just bringing a structure in those images existing? Why not image by using all these databases that are now available online everywhere? But when you actually think of making an image, try to get out of this middle tone.
Mm-hmm.
I often experience photography done in the photographic field that I do a little bit of portraiture, I do a little bit of landscape, I do a little bit of political work. Yeah, it's going a little bit in this direction. And very often the result of this a little bit looks like a little bit. So I ended my talk by encouraging you all, us all, to be much more radical, to be much more radical in what we are saying, to speak it out loudly, to be clear about that I want to talk about the political situation in Switzerland or in India, that I want to talk about my dreams, my feelings, my strange body feelings I have, that I want to be radical, subjective in my way of working as an artist, as a photographer, or I want to really conceptualize, to give an idea about the state of whatever global industry, global economy today, where we maybe not talk about our guts, but maybe we talk in a very different way. I'd love to, if ever possible, to encourage everybody to push in the direction you want to go. How, to come back to your question, how do you teach that?
How do you teach it? Or how do you inspire it as a mentor or a teacher or even as a curator?
Maybe by the way you are yourself. Very often, you know, when...
Well, that's a truly radical thing to say.
You know, we know that parents try to educate their children, but maybe 90% of the education doesn't go along with telling the child what it's allowed to do or what it's not allowed to do. But 90% of the education happens just like that, because there is an adult human being connected to a young human being, and it works. So that kind of personal contact is definitely important. I think it's important to have reference in the history of photography. I think I would take out a photographer and talk about the life of how this artist, how this photographer worked. And I think you need a debate about it. What does it mean? What, in the way you look at photographs, in the way someone is presenting photographs, you have to be as clear as possible. We are in a field, photography is a field where we always think everything is clear, but it's a medium which is so little coded that the field of misunderstanding is so incredibly big that we should be as clear as possible, that everybody should know 1000% what he's doing, because still then the field of experience of the visitor opposite the photograph is still very open, and the person can think his own story while looking at the photograph.
So when you say radicalization, you're talking at once about a kind of visceral connection with who you are and what you want to do and what you want to communicate, and you're also talking about intellectual rigor and rigor of practice, and the two of them together would sort of kick photography out of a kind of middle ground niceness. You think?
Yes. At one point, it's a while ago, I was ending a text I was writing with actually that contradiction. I said very often, I was comparing contemporary art and photography. I said photographers bring in often a lot of visual freshness, but they lack of contextualizing the image, a lack of editing the image. They lack some often of intellectualizing the work they do. And I was saying on the other side, a lot of contemporary artists, it's a while ago, so it has also changed, but they are conceptualizing things, they're using images in a good way, but they don't renew their visual impact. So it would be great if they can learn from each other. Now, think of these two fields, like photographers and artists, as two parts of yourself, in ourselves, as our brain and as our as our guts, I think they have both to work together, as close as possible, as wild as possible, and then we will see kind of refreshed photography, refreshed photographic-based work.
I mean, what you said is very interesting, and I can see, because yesterday I spent a very fascinating day doing portfolio reviews with 14 photographers, and many of whom are here. And what we all were talking about almost in all the sessions was that so much of photography, so much of the emphasis in photography is in just shooting, taking the pictures. And then when one does have a bank of images, what does one do with that? How does one put that together as a body of work? The editing, the reconceptualizing of your material, of your matter. That seems to be sort of taking a kind of less important position in the practice of younger photographers. Do you have something to say about that? Because since so many of the people I was talking to yesterday are here, so I think it would be interesting to bring that up again in relation to our shared experience yesterday.
It's not only about young photographer, but it's it's a specific thing with photography.
With photography.
That a lot of photographers have tremendously problems to edit their own work, to edit their work, to contextualize their work, to give it a frame where these images really start to speak. One reason, it's a very old reason, and it will maybe last for another 1,000 years, is that photographer have a complete different experience of the images than we have as viewers, because for them, each image is an event. They have traveled somewhere, they have encountered a person, they have talked to someone, they have drank tea together, and then an image happened. And now, when they present the image, when they edit their images out, they select according to their memory. But their memory is not necessarily visible in the image. Usually it isn't visible in the image. So they cannot change into a meta level and look at their own photograph as something foreign. I know a Japanese photographer who lives in Austria. He always says, maybe nowadays he would say it differently, because also he would start to use digital photography, because he says, each film I shoot, I put it undeveloped in the fridge for at least 5 years. If 5 years have happened, I take it out and I look at it as if it's something foreign, and I start to learn about what I've done then. It's a very interesting example to talk about the problem of closeness to an image and distance. We as visitors, we enter an exhibition, or we buy a book and we open it up. We look as complete foreigners to this image, and then we also start to bring our stories into the image, which are complete different stories.
This is the problem with subjectivity, isn't it? I mean, my subjectivity may not be yours. So the subjectivity from which I make an image may not be readily and immediately shared by the viewer. So it is with
maybe not the very formulated subjectivity, but photography very often has not to do with this very formulated, but with an energy. When you do a very subjective image, when you show, when you can feel in each image that the photographer is present in the scene, that he brings himself into the photograph. It's the opposite of that kind of distance, taking photographs. Then you can feel that kind of energy. You might not share, you might not exactly understand the detail of this, but you will get the strengthness, you will get the energy out of it. I think in energy-wise, we can share it. We cannot share details. There we have to start to explain quite a bit until another person until the communication works, as Habermas would say. Often communications is then not successful, but on an energy level, I think we can share this experience.
I think this is a good point to open the conversation to the listeners, the audience. Would you?
It's like when I look at the picture and I feel something, and can you just elaborate it a little more from the photographer's point of view and then from the viewer's point of view?
Maybe you can.
I'd love to also
with an example.
I would love to. I hope this person is. I hope this person is in the room, but I hope he doesn't mind. That I take him as an example of the yesterday's portfolio viewing. I met a person who was obviously very shy. And you have to find out, when you talk to that person for a while, why is this photography the way it is? Why it's unclear is he going close to the situation he's photographing? Is he very distant to it? Is he getting in a middle distance to it? So he did a little bit of everything. I go back also to the idea of the radicalization. Maybe I couldn't even say to him yesterday, but I had the strong feeling after the whole meeting, after the whole portfolio meeting, the point why he doesn't know where to go is because he doesn't allow himself to be so shy. He is in a trap. He is shy, but he doesn't allow himself. He should be really shy. He should radicalize his shyness. And then, after a while, we would see pictures where we share the shyness. We would feel the energy. Because he doesn't allow himself to be shy. He maybe doesn't want to be shy. You have all these unclear messages. Very often you have unclear messages in photographs. In the same series, you see 5 images with an energy in that direction, then one in this direction, the third, and then another direction. So I think you have to bring your feelings, your thinking, your subjectivity, your spirit, everything so close together to make a strong rope out of it. And then the spectator has a chance to kind of hold this strong, to get through this strong into the image. And of course, the spectator always brings his own story within the image. I strongly believe that there is not an absolute image that is in the world without the viewer. It's done by a person, an artist, a photographer. You bring it into the public, and the moment you bring it into the public, you also lose it a bit. It doesn't belong to you anymore, because we all come with our own stories in front of the image. But if you are an artist who is strongly aware of that situation, you can play, I mean in a good way, you can play with it, you can use the way you make photographs, because you know then the spectator will feel it. I'm not sure if that is the whole answer for what you were saying, but at least the first try.
Yeah. Can I just add one thing to it?
Yes, very briefly, because there are other people who want to
what
ask.
happens is, when you're seeing a picture, you haven't shown it to someone. Your experience of photograph is different. But the moment you bring it out to the viewers, as a photographer, I start seeing my pictures differently. So when the viewers enter into the play, I start seeing my own image differently.
So you are a photographer? You're talking about yourself when you were saying this?
Yeah, kind of amateurish. Yes.
It would astonish me that you already see the image, differently. I think my experience would be that you are a bit skeptic about how the visitors walk along your images. Oh, they like this image, but I like the other one much more. Why everybody talks about this image and not about the one I love? So you will make this, when you push your images in the public, you get a kind of a feeling of alienation of your own images, because people react differently. They laugh in the wrong moment to your own feelings. You think, hey, what is going on? through those reaction, I think, I'm pretty sure, you start to learn something new about your own image you have done, because you see the public reaction. Maybe you are then also able to see along the visitor your own image in a different way.
Yes, I've been taking pictures for 30 years. 30 years now. And I've been listening to your talk yesterday and what you've been saying today about giving an example first, giving an example by your own conduct.
Okay, much better. I've been taking pictures for more than about 30 years now, and I've been feeling in the last few years that my work has been changing from the information to the private. And I've been listening to what you were saying right now, and with the number of images that are being taken every day, and I've been thinking that it feels to me, and I wanted to know if you share this feeling, that photography might be moving from the information to the spiritual, because it's everything that we've been talking about here, it's all about self-expression and bringing yourself into the picture. And I find it, after 30 years of taking pictures, that I am looking at at the work that's been done today by the people who have maybe taken less of education in photography, are just doing this intuitively, and I feel that that maybe there's a new window that's being opened to people who are more connected to who they are spiritually or personally, to express more easily, because there's less need of the technical aspects of photography. And I'm hoping that I'm clear about what I'm asking, but I feel that it's becoming more of a spiritual journey than of revealing information about what surrounds us. Do you feel the same?
I'm not so sure about the spirituality of photography. So there has been always an alchemistic part in photography, which you can also feel as spiritual. But I hope I can concentrate myself on trying to follow 2 or 3 lines. I think right now there's a tremendous, if we are not, for a moment I'm not talking about the production of a few thousand engaged photographers in the world, but I'm talking about the image world today. The image world today is in a way overwhelming. That right now I have the feeling I'm not sure if in this tsunami of images we are living in, the collapse of looking at these images is already inherent in this image, in the masses of image. When I see the industry, as I told yesterday, the industry says that last year there were more images made than in the 174 years of the history of photography together. 300 million of images are uploaded by Facebook every day. That masses of images makes it, first of all, impossible to look at these images. I think we have images run into a deficit of attention, that we don't look at them anymore. I'm asking myself, what is happening on this flaring sky of images right now? The photographer before, the artist before talking here said a word which I liked a lot. She said, maybe images are today an event. They are no longer information, they are no longer introspection, they are kind of an event. When I see the role of photography, it's an incredible time right now, because everybody in here is at the same time a photographer and a spectator. Everybody has a smartphone. Everybody today takes photographs, so we are both of it. And I see people. I imagine this situation. People are in an evening together. They photograph each other. They laugh. They put 2 or 3 images of online. They look at their cameras. They put 2 or 3 images online, and after that, these images are gone. I think we have an incredible shift from photographic image as an information, as a document, as an aesthetic value, into photography as an event, as a trigger. I have the feeling it's like a small visual drug that is used. Photography is used like that to bring us alive, to bring us through life, and when it has when it has exercised this role, it's dead afterwards. Afterwards, we move those electronical data onto the computer, completely unstructured, maybe structured by year, saying in 2013 summer, those are the 10,000 photographs I made then, and they're put, and we can go on to have a terabyte or a petabyte hard drive to put all these images on it. It's quite an amazing feeling. So how do we behave in it? How do we behave in it when we want to save the image as something that can touches us, that can inform us, that can tell us something about the society? How can we? Because my fear is that we educate in brackets, educate the young generation in not looking at the images anymore, just using them as triggers, as small, very fast triggers. 1 second, yes, one laugh, one click, and another second, everything is forgotten about it. It's a very bizarre situation. So in this field, and therefore I ended my talk yesterday, in this field, I think we have every photographer, every serious image taker has to be stronger than ever before, because he has not to fight his own insecurity, he has not to fight only his own situation, he has to fight that global situation. We have an incredible globalization of images which turn away the attention of a single image, of a single sentence, of a person saying to us, look at this, what I have done here. Before people calm down, before people are able to contemplate, it takes much more energy today. So we have to be more radical in our way of expression. Radical, I mean, not radical in introspection. Yes, if you want to be subjective, if you want to be introspective, then do it, but then do it in a tremendously deep way. Otherwise, people won't listen to you. If you want to say something about something about the drug economy in the world and how governments are involved in the drug traffic in the world, then do it. But do it in such a strong way that when we enter this space, we will never forget this work. So we have to be in our expression stronger than ever before. We have to, our framework, that people can understand what we are saying, that people wake up and look at it, has to be stronger than ever before.
Thank you. I think only in the last sentence it's kind of like connected to where I was trying to lead it. Maybe I did not frame the question properly because I'm myself a little confused. But it feels that, you know, if we compare it to writing, for example, then there would always be those who write poetry and those who compile shopping lists. And if we're talking about photography, there would be the people who take pictures because they have a camera, and there would be those who use the camera as a tool of self-expression. And this is where I was asking, because today what I see around and what I see around in the festival is that the majority of the images that we look at are deep introspection, the reflection of the photographer more than the information that is conveyed with the camera. So this is where I was going in terms of like the question about spirituality, because it's an inner journey, maybe more today than it was in the past, where we needed to see the information about the world. We used to see pictures coming from India to be published in the National Geographic, and people have never seen Calcutta before, so we needed the information. But now the information is out there, and photography, it feels to me that it's changing around us into something else. And that is what I was referring to.
Okay, that's complete. Sorry, maybe you want to answer that?
No, I just thought that In fact, what you're calling spirituality is probably
our world. Now live television does it. We, you know, wherever there's an event, we can see it immediately. From then on, photography has stopped kind of to be the first tool to inform us about the world, to tell me in Zurich what is done in the Himalaya, because I see it much faster, much more direct in live video. Since then, photography is continuously shifting, and what you're saying, you're seeing here in this festival quite intensively. I would call it a concentration on identity questions, which we have been following over the last maybe 20 years. We call in art, we call the 90s the decade of introspection, of identity debates to find out who I am in this world. Maybe photography is sometimes a bit slow in reacting to that and getting it out a bit longer. But for the last 20 years, we have a lot of photography that is doing introspection. And I remember that I did 2 years ago a big exhibition with the Chinese artist Ai Weiwei on his photo-based work. And I was asked many times, you can imagine there was a lot of questions because of Ai Weiwei. I was asked a lot of things, but also the question, why Ai Weiwei? And I was saying, I like incredibly that this artist is not talking about himself, that this artist is permanently talking about the Chinese society, that this artist is looking out in the world, in his own world, and not trying to find out who he is, what is his relation to his wife in his art, but he's looking at the Chinese society, at the political, economical situation. So I think right now there is a wave, a little bit away from that introspective part. Maybe we are still seeing here at the festival. Hoping that I touch now more your question.
Yesterday in your keynote, you mentioned some interesting things about how museums' operating strategies have changed, and I think one of the things that you were focusing on or that you were mentioning was that museums are forced to buy quickly now and cannot follow their policy of long time collecting. I'd want to ask you to maybe elaborate on that and why that's always a bad thing, because couldn't that also be something that's that sets the foundation for new and more contemporary discourses, and wouldn't that also fall within the purview of the responsibilities of any museum?
I think we even had this debate within the museum. Maybe I'm a little bit a traditionalist in some respect. Maybe I believe that when two people start to know each other, it enriches to get to know each other for a while and to get in each other closer. And I have the same feeling with art. It's interesting to see an attractive image. If you show me an attractive image, it's good to see that, but actually I would love to know who is the artist behind, what kind of personality is it, what kind of attitude does this artist have. Okay, in this world, in this series of photographs, I can't really see it yet, so I wait what he's doing next. What is his third work? Is he following? Is he developing? Can I feel now his attitude? And at one point I said, I'd like not to collect pieces, I'd like to collect attitudes, I like to collect personalities, I like to collect conviction. If I want to make a strong program, then I don't want to have attractive, big, colorful, perfect images, but I want to see interesting attitudes and interesting personalities in the museum, in the exhibition and in the collection. Maybe for the collection even more. So for all this, you need a little bit of time. If you shorten down the time, what is done today in everything we can feel the time is shortened down tremendously. everything gets a little bit fashionable. So this spring we love pink images. In May maybe slightly greenish picture. In summer, oh, it's summer, we like yellow pictures, and in autumn maybe we like red pictures. It's getting in the speed of fashion. It's getting the speed of ephemeras that happen and disappear. I always was, and I hope I will be in the future, interested in endurance, in strong positions, that when I look back, I might think of, oh, it's great that we showed this work, because this artist still has to say something today. Even as an elderly artist, he still has a strong voice. And not to find out, oh, we showed or collected a lot of photographers who had 1 or 2 years when they had interesting, fancy, great-looking, sparkling photographs, but then they disappeared, and now they do whatever they develop gift paper for Christmas or something like that. So that would be my answer: to slow down, if ever possible, the speed of collecting. But I explained yesterday why this has become a problem.
Could I just also ask you to maybe also sort of talk about if this is related to, and if so, in what sense, with photo festivals? Because I think in the last 5 years, there's photo festivals erupting everywhere. And it's a great thing because we're celebrating photography, but most festivals do tend to place a premium on unseen, unshowed, and sort of younger work, more so than galleries or museums.
I mean, actually, right now, parallel to the photo festival, there is the Unseen Festival happening in Amsterdam. He is referring, I guess, to that festival. There is a festivalitis in the world right now, and it has to do with our love for events. I can tell you a small story that is happening now. There is in Bologna, and there's in Bologna a new center of industrial culture opening, and I'm installing the opening show of that, and the opening is next week. And but because we live in the event time, nobody believed that you can open up a center of industrial culture at the fringe of Bologna, of the city Bologna, without another event. That the thing that we open up this center. So that company that opened up the center organized a festival of industrial photography in the center, with the weird effect that most of the people will see the festival, but not the new center. So we live in a time where photography is part of that event thing, and yes. I think it's good if a festival is something really fast. The festival is a happening. We're getting together here for 3-4 days, so there can be young, fresh things shown here, discussed this. Maybe for some of the photographers it's the first or third time they go into public, they expose themselves. I think that's a good role of a festival. I even doubt that you should do in festivals then exhibitions of photographers who have been on our planet working for 40, 50 years. I think that's not the place for a festival. The festival can be sparkling.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Aditya. You spoke a little while back about the tsunami of images and how there is, in today's age, such a plethora of work that's out there. How do you think, and do you think that if there is a formal education of photography, not in learning how to use the camera, but of image making, do you think there needs to be a visual language that needs to be formed? And what sort of would lead to creating exceptional content in times like today?
I'd like to halfway answer your question, but adding things to this. Umberto Eco, the famous structuralist, and in the meantime also romancier, said 25 years ago that we are entering in a new middle age. of course, using this term, he was making a reference to the European history, not to the world history. But entering in a new Middle Age, he meant entering what he said in an emblematic age, where we communicate more with image than with language. If that is true, and I think Umberto Eco is more than true, what he said 25 years ago is actually happening today, then we have to fear that we lose our, what is the term in English, Aufklärung, it's the enlightenment, that we lose our idea of clarity and enlightenment because we are all completely illiterate in what is an image. Schools prepare us for what the world is like. They give us mathematics, they give us history, they give us language, they give us geography. But we are living in a time where half of our communication is done through images, but there is no education in image. And not just for the photographers, but also for us as users, as spectators, we have no education in it. We don't even know what an image is. We don't even know what can done with images, how images can, that images are like shelves that can be filled with a lot of content. Whenever you recontextualize an image, it means something else. It's the same looking glass, but it can be filled with completely different contexts. It's very weird that we rush in this world. We are now in this world, but there is no education to understand an image, to know an image, to know the language of images. There's actually just a few samples where there's something a little happening, and I'd like to add this. There is a new institute in Switzerland, in Basel actually, it's called Icones. And this institute, the only aim of this institute is to do a scientific research on what is an image, what does an image tell to us, how do we use images. And now, after this institute was founded 10 years ago, now they start to bring their results in a test phase into the schools in Basel. They make the first tests where they try to make a curriculum that you, as a normal student at the age of 12 years or 15 years, get an education. What is an image? You know how public relations can be so seductive in the way they present us images that these images act as a trigger that we immediately want to buy this product. I think we should learn about all these effects that an image that is involved in images. I hope that is part of the answer you expected it.
You know, when we were at university in the late 80s, early 90s, that I'm speaking for myself, there were two books which we thought were teaching us to see. One was John Berger's Ways of Seeing, and the other was Roland Barthes' Mythologies. So do you think we need a kind of Barthes, Berger-like person to teach us to think about images critically, you know, what you were saying about, because when did those books come? When did Berger's book come out? Do you remember? In the late 60s?
Ways of Seeing is later. Late 60s he brought out the book A Seventh Man together with Jean Moore, which already talked
Mythologies
about...
was late 60s or early 70s.
Mythologies, you're talking about Roland Barthes now?
Roland Barthes, yes.
Mythologies is 57.
Oh, so as early as that?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you name now two incredible personalities. John Berger, who actually is still alive.
Yes.
Still going strong at the age of, 87. Incredible. Roland Barthes unfortunately died in an accident. We definitely need that kind of personality. I would love to get to know a 30-year-old John Berger of today, a 30-year-old Roland Barthes today. We need a permanent, ongoing debate of what is happening on the image level today with us. We are permanently part of it, and we kind of use it. We kind of use it like we open a can and drink out of it, but we don't know a lot about it.
Yeah, my question is about the relationship of the radical with the establishment. You do say that there needs to be an element of the radical more in photography going forward. But when it comes to the relationship of the radical with the establishment, and by the establishment I mean anything from the art establishment or the museums or the galleries and the artist, the radical artist and the establishment, this relationship has a lot of history if you look at it. But in this context of this tsunami of photography, have you seen a relationship change of something which is genuinely radical taking on the establishment or even being crucified by the establishment?
Can you help me with the question? I'm not sure if
I think
really
you're
understand
slightly,
the
I think
question.
you're slightly changing the sense of radical from the sense that Urs used it in, because when you were saying radical, you meant quite literally going back to the roots, going back to the roots of your being and therefore to the sources of the energy that makes you work. Whereas you are using the word radical in a slightly more overtly political way.
Well, it could be sort of a taking on the establishment kind of radical attitude. I don't know if that is a perspective.
Conformism.
To redefine the rules of what is acceptable.
Conformism. Would you call it I mean, the opposite of that radicalism would be conformity. Yes.
I try to answer what I understood is your question. You can shout if it's not. I try to answer rather simply by saying confusion always helps any establishment to control us. We have to get as clear as possible to be an interesting partner or opponent to the establishment. The more we are confused, and this tsunami of images is part of an incredible confusion, it helps nothing in getting clear about the society. It does exactly the opposite. It's kind of sedative of our mind. So it helps the establishment to kind of kill the energy of an opposition.
I think we have time for one more question. Yeah. Would you?
I have two questions. I'll ask
Can
the
you
first
make
one. it quite
Yes.
See, I was when I was growing up, and my father used to take me for exhibitions, or we used to go through old family albums. He used to have this expression. He used to say that these photographs are reflective of the realities of our time, of my time. And even when I see a lot of archival photographs coming out in exhibitions, the people who are processing it or the photographer, use this expression of the photographs being reflective of the social and political realities of those times. My question to you is, are they merely reflective or illustrative, or they're constitutive of those social, political realities? That's my first question.
I was talking about this press photograph yesterday that won the World Press Photo Award that was done in Palestine, in the Gaza Strip. That kind of photography, and any kind of photography, never only documents the world, but it creates the world. It documents. The moment a photographer appears in scenery, the photographer creates a situation that people are aware that there is a photography. So the whole world changes the moment a photographer appears. So you never only reflect on a situation, but you're also active. You're not just passive contemplative, but you're also always active. We should feel, if we can learn something about the globalization of everything is interdependent. Sorry for my English. Interdependent. It's never that I can just watch something. By watching something, something starts to interfere between what I watch and what I am.
Can you ask your second question to Urs at some point in the courtyard? Because it's only fair that we fit in one more question, one more person. Yes.
Hello. Hi, sir. I'm a student of history,
Sorry.
so
I always talked in this direction.
Yeah.
So now he's starting this corner.
Yeah.
You can have a coffee in the meantime.
So you were talking about deficit of attention to an image earlier in one of prior question, sir. Like, do you think that has got to do with the way we have come to interact with an image, in the sense that today you take a photograph, then that goes in the computer, and then it obliviates out of existence? Earlier, for example, you were able to touch the photograph in the terms that of you got a concrete image, as in you had to take the film, and that was developed into a photograph. Do you think the role, the sense of touch of a photograph played a role in the experience of a photograph? And you know, do you think devoiding that experience do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? Like the sense of touch of a photograph, what role does it play?
If it's a good thing or bad thing, it's difficult to say, but I definitely love our senses. I definitely love to touch wood and to feel what wood is. I definitely love to smell a situation. So that's how our nature is. So if you once have been in a dark room and you have the smell in I think that adds something. If it's good or bad that this has changed, it's difficult to judge. But what has changed is we had films from Kodak, from Agfa, 36 exposures. We had the money to buy 2-3 films. We were carefully taking photographs. We were developing the films. Then of each film roll, we maybe took 3-4 images out, and the rest we kept. Maybe we reviewed them and took another 3-4 out. So out of 36 images, maybe 8 photographs played a role in the life of a photographer. This rate has completely changed. Now you push the button 100 times to select maybe one image or none. So the relation between the made image and the image actually used is extremely expanded, and that's changing our relation to images dramatically. And also that we only save them. 99% of photographic images today are never printed anymore. We don't even hold them in the hand, even if they are digitally printed, but they're not. 99% of all images are just digital data saved today, maybe sent around in high speed all over the world, but they never appear as a physical entirety anymore. That definitely changes our relation to images.
My question is okay if I come back?
I think your question has been in a way answered. No? Or, you know, a good thing about festivals is that you can always catch a speaker in the courtyard and talk to him. So, I mean, Urs, I think you should make yourself a little available. So,
yes, over there.
A last one. Yes.
Thanks. I understand your description and your analysis of the globalization of images, and I completely take it in spirit and appreciate it as well. But I just wanted to just sort of give a pause to this idea of the need for radicalization because of the globalization and expansion of images digitally. I remember growing up in a period before digital photography and being bombarded with family albums or albums in people's houses. I grew up with film rolls crammed in my cupboard and contact sheets and prints, and I'm not even really a photographer, and I'm sure a lot of people experience that. So that sort of clutter of images I feel existed and is part of the logic of the technology of photography, and it started perhaps right after its invention of the idea of the photograph and its multiple. I just wanted to sort of push you to maybe comment on the idea that the proliferation itself can be a process that leads to the radicalization, and radicalization not necessarily as a reaction to halt the globalization. I mean, just from your answer to the last question, isn't it possible to imagine that tactility, affect, is something that becomes even more heightenedly important to deal with because of the current sort of technological expansion that we've seen in the last couple of decades? So isn't it possible in that sense, in a sort of Benjaminian spirit, to see the revolution of technology as not necessarily drawing us away from nature, but in fact forcing us to confront nature in a new way? I mean, after all, the whole field of the post-human is something that we've only arrived at in the last few years.
The first question is a bit more difficult to answer, so maybe I'll leave it away, because maybe, or you help me, I don't know the exact translation of proliferation in English. I don't know.
Proliferation is when something replicates itself and multiplies, becomes numerous.
I remember, I have to answer with an anecdote. I remember in the old city of Zurich, there is a square, which is actually the Square of Roses. That's the name of it. In the 70s, this square started to have a market. And in this was definitely a market that had the feeling of being a market opposite to what industries, global industries does, how goods are produced. So this was a market that tried to focus us back to the handmade, to the wooden toys for your children, not the plastic toys. I always had the feeling when I saw this market that this is kind of a helpless movement. It's a nice and joyful movement for that Thursday when this market happens. But the strength of economy is so overpowering everything. The strength of economy, the development of economy, the development of technology is always so strongly developing that this kind of market had the tendency of just looking very nostalgic. I think for our existential need, we have to find a way back to our nature. We have to fight for it. But I tell you, technology is on fast forward. It goes on in a speed where we start to find out maybe we have a problem to cope with that speed as an individual human being. And I won't say this is bad. I won't say I don't want to go there, but I feel it's really an incredible speed and an incredible power it's going on. The whole stream of technology, the whole stream of development of any form of industrial products.
I think we'll have to finish on this note. Thank you very much, Urs, and thanks all of you for your questions. Thank you.
To encourage everybody to push in the direction you want to go. How, to come back to your question, how do you teach that?
How do you teach it? Or how do you inspire it as a mentor or a teacher or even as a curator?
Maybe by the way you are yourself. Very often, when
well, that's a truly radical thing to say.
We know that parents try to educate their children, but maybe 90% of the education doesn't go along with telling the child what it's allowed to do or what it's not allowed to do. But 90% of the education happens just like that because there is an adult human being connected to a young human being, and it works. So that kind of personal contact is definitely important. I think it's important to have reference in the history of photography. I think I would take out a photographer and talk about the life of how this artist, how this photographer worked. And I think you need a debate about it. What does it mean? What, in the way you look at photographs, in the way someone is presenting photographs, you have to be as clear as possible. We are in a field, photography is a field where we always think everything is clear, but it's a medium which is so little coded that the field of misunderstanding is so incredibly big that we should be as clear as possible, that everybody should know 1000% what he's doing, because still then the field of experience of the visitor opposite the photograph. Yesterday I sat maybe we don't need any new images anymore. There are billions, not millions, billions, billions, billions of photographs around. So why making a new image? Why not just using those images? Why not just bringing a structure in those images existing? Why not image by using all these databases that are now available online everywhere? But when you actually think of making an image, try to get out of this middle tone. I often experience photography done in the photographic field that I do a little bit of portraiture, I do a little bit of landscape, I do a little bit of political work. Yeah, it's going a little bit in this direction. And very often the result of this a little bit looks like a little bit. So I ended my talk by encouraging you all, us all, to be much more radical, to be much more radical in what we are saying, to speak it out loudly, to be clear about that I want to talk about the political situation in Switzerland or in India, that I want to talk about my dreams, my feelings, my strange body feelings I have, that I want to be radical, subjective in my way of working as an artist, as a photographer, or I want to really conceptualize, to give an idea about the state of whatever global industry, global economy today, where we maybe not talk about our guts, but maybe we talk in a very different way. I'd love to, if ever possible, is still very open, and the person can think his own story while looking at a photograph.
So when you say radicalization, you're talking at once about a kind of visceral connection with who you are and what you want to do and what you want to communicate, and you're also talking about intellectual rigor and rigor of practice, and the two of them together would sort of kick photography out of a kind of middle ground niceness.
Yes. At one point, it's a while ago, I was ending a text I was writing with actually that contradiction. I said very often I was comparing contemporary art and photography. I said photographers bring in often a lot of visual freshness, but they lack of contextualizing the image, a lack of editing the image. They lack some often of intellectualizing the work they do. And I was saying on the other side, a lot of contemporary artists, it's a while ago, so it has also changed, but they are conceptualizing things, they're using images in a good way, but they don't renew their visual impact. So it would be great if they can learn from each other. Now, think of these two fields, like photographers and artists, as two parts of yourself, in ourselves, as our brain and as our guts. I think they have both to work together, as close as possible, as wild as possible, and then we will see kind of refreshed photography, refreshed photographers.
While you get things sorted in your head as to what you want to ask him, or, I mean, you don't really have to ask a question, I mean, but just do try to keep it short and precise so that we can make this conversation more inclusive. And so in about 15 minutes, we will open our conversation to the audience, and then it can go back and forth. I just thought, Urs, to take you back to the way you finished your keynote lecture yesterday. And you talked very interestingly about subjectivity and introspection, that in this age of the proliferation of the digital image and the photographic image, what can animate or reanimate photography is, in a way, the human mind. And I was trying to think about how that would have an impact, or how one could, from the point of view of a photographic education, include that kind of an approach to teaching photography to young people, for instance. How do you teach subjectivity? How do you teach introspection?
I might have a problem to answer that question because I restarted teaching 3-4 days ago. I was actually teaching photography before I started the museum, which is more than 22 years ago. And now, after having finished the museum, I will restart teaching at the art school in Zurich. So I will actually be confronted with that question myself.
And what will you do?
How can you teach it? Before maybe we start to talk about how we can teach it, I'd like to answer in that field and say how needed this is. At one point,
welcoming Urs again in another space of the Habitat Center. And on behalf of Nazar and the Habitat Center, I have to yet again thank Chandrika Grover and Pro Helvetia for getting Urs here. I'm also delighted that Avik Sen is here, one of the most sensitive and insightful writers on photography. I think most of you must have been here for the keynote address, which was given by Urs in the amphitheater last evening. And in the slightly muggy but rainy yet beautiful environment of the amphitheater, we heard lots of ideas and debates centering around photography, which Urs ended, which I thought was the nicest way, by in fact giving a message to all the young photographers to just think differently, look differently, and represent differently. So this session really basically is a follow-up to what he said yesterday, for all those who want to ask him questions and couldn't ask questions yesterday. And Avik is here to kind of field the questions well and carry on the debate in a
and to make sure that the questions are really questions. And not just a long sentence with a question mark at the end. So
well, I leave that to the two of you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
I just thought it would be good to kick off a conversation with Urs.